The following presentation is an exclusive interview with the world-renowned founders of the International Centers for Attitudinal Healing, Dr. Jerry Jampolsky and Dr. Diane Cirencioni. Together they have taken the concept of attitudinal healing to over 50 countries and have inspired the creation of over 100 centers for attitudinal healing around the world. Do you want to find happiness through a new approach to life, to change negative patterns into positive ones, and to turn your world into a joyous experience? Let's explore with Dr. Jampolsky and Dr. Cirencioni, as interviewed by me, Dr. Terry Shintani, on Hawaii's longest-running health show, Healing and You. These lessons can help you experience life as fully and as peacefully as it can be, starting right now. I'd like to welcome you all to Healing and You Radio. I'm Dr. Shintani, and tonight we have the privilege of having two very special guests, Dr. Jerry Jampolsky and Dr. Diane Cirencioni. Dr. Jampolsky is the founder of Attitudinal Healing, and Dr. Diane Cirencioni is the executive director of Attitudinal Healing International. And they've been promoting this concept of attitudinal healing for many years now. There's over 100 attitudinal healing centers around the world. They've lectured in over 50 countries, and we're very privileged to have them on the show. And tonight we're going to be talking about the new edition of their best-selling Love is Letting Go of Fear. Dr. Jampolsky, Dr. Cirencioni, thank you for being on the show.
Hi, it's great to be back with you.
Our pleasure.
And for this show, I want to highlight actually one of your seminal works, Love is Letting Go of Fear. It's a book that has withstood the test of time. I remember getting it, I bought it when it first came out, if I recall. I bought it in the early 80s. I think it came out in 1979. But since that time, my goodness, 5 million copies, isn't that right?
Correct.
And how many languages is it in?
Over 30.
30 languages. This concept of love is letting go of fear has gone around the world and helped probably millions of people. If you look at how many books, how many copies have been sold in different countries, if you consider that books are not only read by the people who buy them, but by their friends, you've helped millions of people. Now, can you start off by letting us know how you came to writing this book?
Well, I wrote a booklet called A Mini Course for Healing Relationships. That came after I had a bunch of 3x5 cards when I became a student of A Course in Miracles, and it's a thick book, and I'm dyslexic, and I don't like long books, and I needed something a little more simple, and then I created a mini course for healing relationships, which now has been expanded into a mini course for life. And then I was guided to write a book called Love is Letting Go of Fear that would have cartoons and make it more reader-friendly with a lot of stories in it. And I had never written a book before. As a matter of fact, when I went to University of California as an undergraduate back in 1943, I took a English exam for a freshman. I flunked it, which meant I had to take a special course in dumbbell English. And I got a D- in it at the end of the semester, and the professor came up to me and said, Jampolsky, I don't know what you're going to do in life, but for God's sakes, don't ever try to write a book. And of course I believed him, and because my grammar was terrible and I couldn't spell.
Well, you have undiagnosed dyslexia.
That's true. And
I think that's hilarious because now you've written 15 books.
Yeah, it's a big lesson not to give your power away to someone, for me. And the book came out, and I felt it really helped one person. I really wrote it for myself, actually, for my own spiritual pathway. And it really wasn't selling that many books. And then I got a telegram. They sent telegrams in those days from a guy named Orson Bean. He was a famous actor and on television a lot, Broadway plays, and I didn't know him, but he sent a telegram saying, please watch Johnny Carson tonight. Well, I don't usually stay up that late, but I did that day. And Johnny Carson asked Orson a question, which he said, I won't answer that question, but I want to tell you something about something that changed my life. And he pulled this book out called Love is Letting Go of Fear. And it became a bestseller. He talked about it for 20 minutes. Now it changed his life. And people ask me, well, who was your agent to get you on that show? And I said, I don't have any agent. I think it must have been God, not my agent.
Boy, that's an amazing story.
But, as we look at today, here we are in 2011, and Don and I were talking about this earlier today, that the world situation is really in a critical area. People are getting killed in wars. People want their boys to come back, thinking that war is not an answer to problems. Many people are being killed in streets, gang wars in terms of drug addiction. People are losing their homes. There's tremendous financial insecurity. People are scared of terrorists. People are afraid of nuclear destruction or nuclear contamination, as what's just recently happened in Japan. And it's a world where people are pretty worried, and they don't see any answers. They don't seem to think that politicians have the answer, and they look around and they can't find the answer themselves. And I'm convinced, and Diane's convinced, that the answer comes from some type of spiritual way of looking at life, finding another way of looking at life. Do you want to add to that, Diane?
Well, I would just add that I think a lot of the experiences are really based in fear. There's so much fear, and what happens is that a lot of us are making decisions based on fear rather than on love, and that just proliferates the fear more. So the concept and the idea that love is letting go of fear is, more relevant than ever.
Right.
Sometimes you think, oh, this book was written in a certain time and it was wrong. Now it's like even more relevant.
And now
even
it's
than
more
it was,
relevant than it was in the 1970s or 80s when
exactly,
they first came out.
Exactly, because it is the antidote to fear.
And one of the things that I always thought was this concept, Dr. Jampolsky, for the viewers, started out as a child psychiatrist, right?
Child and adult both.
An adult psychiatrist. Now, I thought when I first met you, Dr. Jampolsky, I thought it was so interesting that a medical doctor, a trained psychiatrist, would look at love and fear in this way. How did that fit in? How did this concept fit in with your experience as a psychiatrist?
Well, it really didn't fit in, because that's not the way psychiatry
Right, isn't that interesting?
was practiced. So it really,
and that's actually what I was thinking. I thought, wow,
had,
this is a remarkable physician, because this isn't how all of the doctors are trained to have some training in psychiatry, and this is not how we were taught.
In those days, forgiveness wasn't taught in medical schools or for psychiatric residents. The word attitude was hardly known. And Love is Letting Go of Fear began to form the basis for attitudinal healing. And the concepts and the principles that are in Love is Letting Go of Fear and that are in A Mini Course for Life and many of our other books really came from A Course in Miracles, where Di and I really became students of those. But we wanted to create a way of dealing with practical spirituality and everyday problems that would be reader-friendly. And that's why Love is Letting Go of Fear has a lot of cartoons in it.
Oh, it's it's a wonderful book.
And a picture can, even the cover, which has a boat and a fear, and then letting go of the fear, if you will. And because Love is Letting Go of Fear it's based on the fact that there are only two emotions, love and fear. Well, that wasn't what I was taught in medical school and psychiatric residency. But when you stop to think about it, when we're making decisions, our decisions are usually made on the ego part of that mind, that's the ego mind, that's based on fear. And the premises of fear is the purpose of relationships is to find separation, to attack people you don't like or that are attacking you, to interpret people's behavior and to decide who's guilty and who's not, that some people should be punished and you should withdraw your love from them. And from a spiritual standpoint, this didn't make any sense anymore to me. And I really like the fact that we have inner peace as our only goal, because the ego is so strong that it wants to, if you put love first, it really comes in, well, a lot of people are unloving. And it kind of looks at it from an external standpoint. But in attitudinal healing, we say it's possible to have inner peace as our only goal. In fact, that's what we're born with in our heart. And our first principle is the essence of our being is love. So attitudinal healing became a very practical way. One of the cartoons it demonstrates one of the principles in the book, that when we give something to someone, we receive it at the same time. Well, the world's law is, if I get my wallet out and give you $5, I have $5 less.
Right, I think that's one of the, right.
Yeah,
that's
but
one
if you love it, you keep getting it back, you keep receiving it.
Right, that's one of my favorite cartoons in this book. Love is letting go of fear. There's a number of cartoons, and look, I just flipped right to it, and it's a picture of someone with a big bag of money and giving away cash, and as you give away cash, material things, your bag gets smaller and smaller, you have less and less. Whereas if you give love, you start having more and more and more. And that's one of the most wonderful principles that people can learn. It's so simple and yet so powerful it could change a person's life. And in fact, one of the reasons I have your 12 principles of attitudinal healing in my very first book that I wrote, and one of the great things about it was it's a very Hawaiian concept. You know, it's so relevant.
It's full of aloha.
Aloha, the aloha spirit, give and keep giving. They say the modern way is give and take. The ancient way is give and keep giving. And when you give love, you wind up having more of it than when you started. It's just one of the great principles that you've taught so many people, and I think everyone needs to learn that one simple lesson. And by the way, this book has, what is it, 12 principles, 12 concepts.
12 concepts.
12 lessons, actually.
12 lessons.
And
Not the principles of attitude healing, but the
Right, there are
lessons.
12 lessons about attitudinal healing, not the principles, but practical, useful lessons that everyone can put into practice right away.
Yeah, and what's new in this book is we're talking about terrorists, how to deal with terrorists, how to deal when you're suffering financial insecurity, how do you deal with fear in your everyday nuclear war.
Right, now they're not so afraid of nuclear, or they're afraid of terrorism.
Well,
right?
they're afraid of radiation.
And they're afraid of radiation
So,
too.
and actually, we're talking about now the newly released edition of Love is Letting Go of Fear, the 3rd edition, just recently released by Random House.
And my favorite cartoon, I think there are about 12 or 15 cartoons there, is a little cartoon that says, let's look at a person's light rather than their lampshade. And
Now
so,
that's another great.
Yeah, so often our ego wants to look at people, and if they're fat, we don't like them. If they're too thin, we don't like them. If they're not the right religion, we don't like them. If they're not the right color, we don't like them. All kinds of interpretations go on. And when we let go of the costume that people wear and just see the light that we were all born with, somehow we find ourselves experiencing peace, and we begin to have a purpose that's greater than ourselves, because when we have a purpose of being in a consciousness of giving and helping other people, we're no longer thinking about our body.
And one of your great lessons along those lines, what's that statement you say? The light in you is all I see. Can you say it so that I won't mess it up?
Okay. I'm gonna let Don say it.
Your light is all that I see and is but a reflection of the light in me.
Want to say it one more time?
Say it again, so that because I want people to learn
Right.
that. This is just it's
your
worth.
light is all that I see and is but a reflection of the light in me.
So if you take the person that is the most obnoxious person you know. And angry, attacking, all the other kinds of stuff you can imagine. And what we feel in our work in attitudinal healing and love is letting go of fear, that person obviously is not expressing love, but he must be very fearful. He must have a fearful child in him. So if we see that person as fearful, our heart opens up and we start giving love to that person, and we start feeling peace again.
Because they wouldn't be acting that way unless they felt some level of fear inside. And if you can remember it, I think the key to attitudinal healing really working is that if you can remember that in those moments that are so crazy, that you're so sure this person is wrong and that you're right, and that they're really out of line. It doesn't mean they're not all those things, but it means that if you could see them, you can just shift for a moment off that point and say, they must be fearful or they'd never be acting this way. And so that really helps us in our relationship, and we're together 30 years now and married 21 years. And whenever one of us gets off kilter and you feel like, you feel like you're being attacked or the person's upset, if I can remember for a moment to think of Jerry as, wait a minute, he must be feeling fearful now of something. And
Right.
what is that? So and vice versa. And so when I think of him as being fearful, my whole defense mode gets laid aside.
Right.
You're an attorney as well as a
Right,
doctor.
yeah,
Dr.
now
Shintani.
no one is.
So now
Right,
we're
now
not
they're
in
not
attack.
attacking.
There's no attack and defense,
Right.
and you stop the energy, and then I can really, really hear, and you actually hear differently.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. It's very powerful to use in interpersonal relationships as well as
To see
with the world
things
in general.
if you think they're attacking you,
Yes.
you see it differently as,
Exactly.
wow, this person is really lacking something. They are afraid of something.
They're afraid of something. So then, and oftentimes we will say to each other, Jerry will say to me, I'll say to him, what are you afraid of right now? What are you most afraid of? And then you're able to actually articulate what's
Right.
really going on.
Right.
It's
And a lot of times, maybe most or maybe all the time, people attack because they're fearful.
I think it's always. We might think that it's just on the defense, but of course you're still fearful when you're on the defensive.
And
So.
actually, in one of the principles that's in here is I am determined to see things differently.
That's right.
And isn't this part of it?
Exactly. It's that choice, and like Jerry mentioned before, my favorite cartoon in there is a fellow with the lampshade over his head, and he said, I can choose to see someone's light instead of their lampshade. And the lampshade is all the costumes we wear. It's all the acting out that we have. It's all the aberrant behavior. And to say, oh, wait a minute, okay, if that's not who the person is, what's underneath it? And if you can
Right.
actually remember that there is a light there, as you start to see it, they start to act it usually.
Right, because the lampshade is just their outer
Right, it's the
window
outer
dressing.
frame. Exactly, and we all have lampshades.
Right, because
But we're hoping that somebody will see the light underneath.
There's a story in Love is Letting Go of Fear about a restaurant, some couples going there to have dinner on their anniversary, and the waitress is very snotty and very abrupt, spills coffee on them, doesn't get their food to them for a long time, and the guy's getting angrier and angrier and decides to go complain to the owner and doesn't want to leave a tip. But if we run through that again and someone tells this person that, the waitress that's waiting on you tonight, husband died 3 days ago and she's got 5 kids at home, all of a sudden your heart opens up and you live even a bigger tip, and you don't pay attention to the behavior.
right,
So
because it isn't always all about you, because the person is thinking, wow, they're not giving me good service.
Right. And you may not
Or,
know the situation,
right.
but we're saying if
It
you
has-
leave just a little bit of extra room, just think there is a situation that I don't understand.
Right,
So Love is Letting Go of Fear has lessons that help us learn to let go of the feeling that you're a victim, and let go of healing the past. Forgiveness is really the core of attitudinal healing. It's the core of Love is Letting Go of Fear. And forgiveness doesn't really mean condoning a behavior. You might want to share some thoughts on forgiveness.
All
Diane.
right, believe that it means condoning inappropriate behavior. It doesn't mean agreeing with the person. It doesn't mean letting someone do this over to you over and over again. But we're talking about forgiveness. We're talking about the inner experience of releasing the grievances that we have, so we can once again go inside and say, what do I need to think, say, and do about this situation? And then act from that place as opposed to the reactive place.
Right. So the new edition of Love is Letting Go of Fear has tips and tools on how to deal
Yes.
with a lot of interpersonal relationship
Absolutely,
situations.
including forgiveness is the key to happiness.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's waking up in the morning, Terry, and having the goal of inner peace, having the goal of wanting to be helpful to others, having the goal of loving others as you would love yourself, if you will, doing your best to heal the illusion that we're separate from each other and begin to experience a sense of oneness with the world, and recognizing that there's more to this world than our ego needs, and the ego that always wants greed. You know, the ego will say, well, you know, you'd be happy if you had $1 million, and then you get the $1 million, and then the ego says, well, that's not enough. You need $2 million,
Right.
and it keeps saying more and more and more.
Right. And if you compare that to somebody who's in some war-torn country or a third world nation, boy, I wish I had $10 and they would be happy. Well, most of us have more than $10 and we're not happy. You know, it's a matter of perspective and frame of mind and looking at things differently.
So it's letting go of our obsession with consuming things. It's never enough. Wanting to get things which are never enough. And dealing with love. Seeing love as the answer to every problem that we'll ever face. It's not about form.
Say that again.
That love is the answer to every problem that we face today or tomorrow. And it's about, one of the other lessons is living in this instant as the only time there is. Not linear time, but this instant. And if we appreciate this instant more than any other, and make a decision, I'm going to be happy this instant, then we start being happy. There's a wonderful story about a blind lady who comes to a retirement home, and she's waiting to get her room, and there's a big line there, and one of the guys says, well, I see you're waiting, but I can show you your room now, and then you can sign the papers later, see if you like it. And he said, well, that's not necessary. I've already made up my mind before I came here that I'm going to like it and I'm going to be happy with it. Great lesson in knowing that happiness doesn't depend on what other people do to us or what other people say to happiness.
She made up her mind already.
On her own inner, it's all about inner healing, not about external circumstances. So it's living in a different reality, a reality where there's only love, where there's only peace. And there was a 13-year-old kid who was dying, and I asked him, you know, if you could help other kids, what advice would you give? Because he's the first kid that was dying.
Yeah.
And he said, well, you just tell everyone that as long as they're breathing in their body, their job is to love other people and to love themselves.
Wow, what a piece of
we find kids are great
deep
teachers.
Wisdom
kids,
from a 13-year-old.
Yeah, kids have been wise teachers in young bodies, teaching Diane and I and all the various volunteers and the
I can think of
centers.
many adults that are not as wise as that one kid.
Well, we learn a lot from other kids, and I think it's important when we getting in the latter years of our life to remind ourselves of having a little kid inside of us that's always active and eager to forgive and not wanting to hold on to grudges. And that's what we do. And I think attitude healing in Love is Letting Go of Fear makes use of people who are getting older and they're feeling like they're a victim. Their bodies don't work as much as they did. And a lot of other things are happening. And when they choose not to be a victim, choose to make forgiveness their main function in life, they start becoming mellow and they don't take themselves so seriously and they become peaceful and happy.
Right, it's part of it is getting the ego out of the way. So
exactly. And I think we only do that 1 second at a time, because the ego wants to come back and make us suffer. So when we live 1 second at a time and make that an eternal moment, and when we let go of our fear of dying and don't believe that bodies are our true reality, but that we are really the essence of love, we're spiritual beings, life becomes different. This is how we can look at the world differently.
Now, I know that one of your lessons is the past is over and it can touch me but there are a lot of people who have grudges that they have to deal with over time, and they have difficulty getting over them. What's your advice for people like that? What's the advice that you have?
Well, in this book, we talk about the fact that many people in this world feel that there are certain things that people do that are unforgivable. And what we talk about here is that it's possible to change that belief to everything is forgivable. It all comes back to ourselves. When we think someone else out there deserves our unforgiveness, it's really about something that's happened inside of us that we're projecting out on that other person. So it becomes really important to recognize, as Diane said a few moments ago, that forgiveness doesn't mean condoning with something that was bad.
Right, right. You're not going to condone someone who's done some awful act.
Yeah, but it means not holding on to the anger,
right.
and to realize that justified anger doesn't bring us that peace of mind. And when we relive to that thing, we are able to change. And we're all work in process. We still practice every day these principles. And there are days, I don't think I've gone through a day where I've not made a judgment. But I think we're doing better as we go along, and it's much more easier to do it when you see the value in it.
I think also when you think in terms of that principle that the past is gone, it can hurt me not. I think it's really helpful, at least it is for me, to stop for a moment and to separate out periodically the past, the present, and the future. And the future is actually just something we make up. It actually doesn't exist. It's just something. It's a way to contextualize our worries,
right,
so that when they become the present, we can manifest them. Right. So that's
right.
And to plan so that when it becomes the present, it doesn't turn into chaos. But the past is what we seem to hang on to more. We may fear the future, or we'll be excited about the future. But the past is like all these experiences we've had, some of them very negative in our lives. And so it still feels like it's hurting us. And so what attitudinal healing helps us do is to realize that this is the only instant that actually is real, that's happening. And then, then there's the next instant, and now that instant is in the past. So it's really only what you're experiencing in the moment. And in order to really experience love in the moment, you have to be very present. And if your mind and your heart and it is stuck in the past with unhealed relationships, that we never really experience the truth of life in the present. So it's helpful to heal the relationships from the past. And attitudinal healing teaches us that it's not that the other person has to be different or has to change from the past, because what happened.
Right.
That's not going to change.
That is not going to change.
That's also not what's hurting us in the present.
Right.
What's hurting us in the present are our thoughts and attitudes and judgments about that experience. And those are things that we could do something about because they're all internally inside of us. So we have the ability to heal our own minds and hearts, and that's what attitudinal healing is. And it's healing the ability to choose once again.
Right.
It's not our attitudes.
And it's not the past that's hurting people.
No.
It's the way that we process.
Exactly.
It's our attitudes about the past.
And realize that it's actually all happening in our head. Because when you think of the past, that person might be dead, it might be eons ago, it might have been last week, maybe it's somebody that doesn't even know they hurt us, maybe it's someone that does know they hurt us. But the reality is that that's not happening right now. What's happening now is going on in my head. And attitudinal healing gives great power to your own responsibility and ability to be able to heal your own mind and heal your own heart through forgiveness.
So when you say letting go of the past is gone, we're talking about releasing ourselves from the bondage of the belief system that the past is going to repeat itself. True forgiveness really lets go of the total past, so it allows us to come in the present. Otherwise, what we're doing is we take the past from the grievances we've had, superimpose it on the present, and play old movies of the past thinking that they're present new movies. And when you release the past, then you're totally in the present and can be totally involved in dealing with the present, which means enjoying this moment by seeing everyone as the light and seeing that your real purpose here is being that light and love energy that helps bring light into a world that seems to be suffering from darkness today, when there's so much fear and anger and hating and hurting and killing each other. And one of the other principles we have is that to wake up each day and say, I'm not going to hurt other people or myself with my thoughts or my actions. Now that seems like a simple statement, but most of us are, including myself at times, shoot ourselves in the foot by hurting ourselves or criticizing ourselves or holding on to guilt and holding on to shame.
And actually, one of the principles you talk about is giving and receiving are the same.
Yes?
But wouldn't that also apply as if you hurt somebody, you're actually hurting yourself also?
Exactly. It's like a boomerang. You throw a boomerang around,
Right.
it comes right and hits you in the face.
I like
Right.
this example you always have used over the years, Jerry, that imagine you're like a Siamese twin to another person.
Yeah.
So you're literally attached at the hip or at the arm. And when you hit the other person, you're really hitting
You're hurting yourself.
Right.
Right.
It's very graphic.
Yeah. But can you think of an example where someone used or someone read your book and it made one or more of the principles made a big difference in their life?
Well, I'm thinking of a girl who was 12 years of age, and I was surprised that someone 12 read the book and got something out of it. Her parents were in the process of getting a divorce, and they're living separate at the time. And this little girl really understood what forgiveness is all about. Shared the book with her parents, who really weren't that interested in reading it, but did read it. They reconciled their problems and came to one of our lectures maybe 2 years later and wanted to share how important the daughter was. Are you aware that someone 12 years old could read this book and get something out of it?
And the parents were together.
And Love is Letting Go of Fear has been used as a text in many colleges. It's been used in foreign languages around parenting, if you will.
I think a more recent story too, Jerry, is that there's a woman who is 79 years of age. Her name is Ambassador Ibun. She was the Nigerian ambassador from Nigeria to Mexico. And about 2.5 years ago, she was in Mexico City and visited the Center for Attitudinal Healing there. There's actually centers now. There's 4 major centers in Mexico, and there are 27 cities that have support groups in them. And she visited there, and she got Love is Letting Go of Fear. Blew her mind. She went, oh my God, this is the answer to what we need in Nigeria. And she's sort of the anti-corruption mama. She's been in politics there and has really known for her integrity, etc. So she's gone back, and it's quite amazing what she's done. There's a Center for Attitudinal Healing there, and she does TV shows, and she has the royal fathers now, who are the main chiefs of all the chiefs in the country, who are on board now to train people with attitudinal healing, to work in the communities, because what it does is it teaches personal responsibility for everything you think, say, and do. What better way to move out of corruption than to take responsibility for what you're doing? Because Nigeria does have a very poor reputation globally. So that's, and then another story, Jerry, I just thought of also is Jerry and I returned last August from Outer Mongolia, from Ulaanbaatar, and a woman there who's a banking consultant had a brother who committed self-suicide, and she was very despondent for about 3 years. She was traveling in Europe, and in Holland, she found Love is Letting Go of Fear, and said, oh my God, this is the first thing that's really given me some hope on how to heal my heart. And it was so meaningful for her. She decided, she went back to Ulaanbaatar and said, we need this in Outer Mongolia. We've only been an independent country now for 20 years from the Soviet Union, and we are so lacking in resources. She connected with us, and of course there's a major center there now.
That's terrific.
There are a couple of stories I put in the introduction of the new book, new edition, and it's strange that Love is Letting Go of Fear has sort of an energy of its own, and so we were at a funding night for attitudinal healing, and a woman came up to me and reminded me that her son was a classmate of my younger son, Lee, and mentioned a story that when I was traveling, that my son Lee got the keys to my office and had a party where people got kind of drunk in it.
Oh, this is when he was a teenager,
Yeah,
right?
this is when he was a teenager. This is 30 years later,
Yeah.
and that her son had too much beer and fell against the bookcase, and a book fell from above, and it was Love is Letting Go of Fear. And he decided, oh, that's an interesting cover. He'd take it home with him. Well, he never read the book, but the mother read it and changed her life. So I went called Lee and said, the truth will come out, maybe 30 years later. He said, well, Dad, that wasn't the only party I had.
At least it was.
Another thing is, just recently in Cameroon, Africa, there's a guy named Natasha, and he had a very successful, well, you might want to tell that story, Dan.
Well, you can start and I'll finish. Or okay, I'll be glad to share it. Tasha Abdu, he had a very successful business. We can maybe share it together, Jerry. And he had a wife and some children, and 2 children, and he got into drugs and addiction and gradually lost his business, lost his wife and his children. And he was, as he said, derelict was the word he used. And he was practically penniless. He was on a country road, and there was a little cart, and there were some books on it, and he saw A Love is Letting Go of Fear on this back road in Cameroon, Africa.
Wow.
And he had just pennies in his pocket, and he traded the pennies for the book. And he read the book, and then he read it again and again. He read it 12 times. It was like his Bible. And he changed his life. He not only got his new businesses started and going, got his wife and his children back, and he when he connected with us, he said, we want this in Cameroon, and I'm committed now to doing a Center for Attitudinal Healing here in Cameroon. And they recently completed a marvelous training where people came from different countries in Africa, and it's just it's quite exciting. He's deeply involved now and has trained a number of people there.
In Hawaii we say chicken skin.
Yeah, chicken skin,
instead of
yeah.
goosebumps. It must
Right.
give you chicken skin
There's
to hear stories like that.
thousands of stories around this book.
Well, you're not only
Thousands.
changing 1 or 2 or 3 people's lives, you're starting to have an impact on nations, and that's incredible.
But it all starts with healing our own mind, really.
Right. But one mind at a time as well.
Right.
The woman from Nigeria or the one from Mexico.
And then the influence they have
right.
on their countries is so amazing.
It's amazing.
And I think something else that will really give you chicken skin on both arms is that in Japan, Dr. Hiroko Mizushima is a medical doctor, and you've met her, and she's also a psychologist, and she is a former senator in the Daiei in Japan. She's about 42 years of age, married with 2
Just
children.
a remarkable
woman, yes.
Unbelievably remarkable woman.
And Love is Letting Go of Fear changed her life. She came and did a 9-month internship at the Center for Attitudinal Healing in Northern California.
Wow.
Brought her whole family over, went back, started the center in Japan. There were already groups and a small center also in Yokohama then, and she started it, and this is maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Now she has there's attitudinal healing groups in 20 cities in Japan, and she has 60 trained facilitators. And the
incredible.
Head of internal relations in the country has asked her how she can take attitudinal healing and communicate that out into the countryside. So in small communities where people are very private about their business and don't want to come into a group maybe. One of her facilitators had the brilliant idea to say, let's do a Skype support group for people from different parts of the country. Because they don't know each other then, and it's anonymous, and it's proving to be very, very successful. So, and she's really quite amazing.
We got another phone call 2 weeks ago from Guadalajara, and they're doing workshops in a place called Chihuahua, which is on the border of El Paso, Texas, where all the killing is going on from gang wars, and police are getting killed and innocent people. And they've asked for help around loss and grief because so many people are dying there. So now they've given 3 workshops there, and it's going.
That's amazing.
And Love is Letting Go of Fear is one of the books that they're using. They're also using this in prisons in Guadalajara on the particularly people who are addicted to drugs. Remember
Right,
that?
yes, right. And the Guadalajara Center's about 18 years old now, founded also by a child psychiatrist, and and he's the gentleman, Carlos, and his wife Lucero is a teacher. And they have something like 16 groups a week, and their prison program has become so successful there that AA and the prison system have joined together with them and asked them to take this program into prisons throughout Mexico.
That's incredible.
And a lot of other people, of course, use attitudinal healing in prisons. San Quentin's had a... How long ago did you start that group in San Quentin, Jerry?
1976.
Yeah, so, I mean, there we are. It's like,
Boy, that's amazing.
35 years ago or something.
For the viewers, we're talking about the third edition, the new third edition of Love is Letting Go of Fear.
And this is the 25-year edition, but now we have the 30-year edition now, right?
It's the 30-year edition.
Right.
And it's updated, right? This is
Yes.
an updated version.
Yes.
Correct.
So
With new material in
there's
it.
new material in it. So if you have an older version, you might be interested. People might be interested in the new updated edition because, boy, this has gone around the world several times now.
Well, what a gift that of all the publishers, a smaller publisher has had it for years. And then Bantam also published it. And Random House, who's owned by Bertelsmann, was the largest publisher in the world, now publishes Love is Letting Go of Fear, which is a great gift because it's to have it that kind of a resurgence.
Sure.
Because it is more relevant now than ever.
More than ever,
Yeah.
because this world is full of fear of
Yeah.
poverty, fear of war, fear of terrorism, fear of radiation,
Fear of financial devastation.
Natural disasters.
15% of the world are refugees. Can you even imagine? I can't imagine kind of fear. When I think of challenges in my own family, and my mom is aging and health and things, and then I think 50% of the world is living in tents or walking on a road somewhere,
Right.
and their grandparents or their parents or their babies are dying along the way.
Right.
Then I think we do not have any problems.
Right.
We have inconveniences compared to that. Yeah,
right.
that's a shift in attitude.
It's a total shift in
Yes,
attitude.
right. When you think you're having a really bad day, and it's not to take away from the fact that we don't have challenges in our lives, but the reality is that people have a lot more challenges than we do in this culture.
And actually, can you tell the story? One of my favorite stories you tell is about how the person who was during a war, and he was in the basement, and they were bombing, and he still felt peace.
Oh, right. Well, okay, Jerry. Yes, there's a professor from the university in Zagreb, in Croatia, and it's during the war there in Croatia and Bosnia and Serbia, and he would go across the border every day and to be with his students, and they would continually being bombed at the university. He was a student of Course in Miracles and also attitudinal healing, and he was in the basement one day with the students, and because the building was being bombed all around them, and they had one candle in the middle of the room, and it was absolutely terrifying.
It had to be. I mean,
exactly.
Bombs falling around.
And he shares the story about, at that moment, he decided to draw upon what he knew to be true, to draw upon the fact that he had the ability to find another way of looking at what was going on. And he had another way of being. And he decided to invite the students to meditate with him and to go into the light. Because he kept focusing on the principle that I can be peaceful on the inside regardless of what is going on outside.
One more time, 9-7.
I can be peaceful on the inside regardless of what is going on all around me. And here hell was breaking loose all around him. And he said it was one of the most profoundly peaceful moments he had ever experienced in his life.
Isn't that amazing? Now that's
I draw on that story also.
Isn't that a great statement?
Yes.
Because here he is feeling profoundly peaceful
Yes.
in the middle, not
Right.
only of a war, but he's being bombed in the
Right.
middle of a war, and he's still able to be peaceful. If a person can do that, what are we complaining about?
It shows you the power of the mind.
Right.
Yes.
And-
That peace is a
and-
choice.
and peace is a choice, which leads me to say that the Hawaii Center of Attitudinal Healing has an interesting program at Campbell High School.
Right. The power to
And
choose.
it's called The Power to Choose. And it's not telling kids what to do, but it's creating the choices they have other than fighting. And I think the one in high school thing.
Yeah, I think that these kids have found that they have choices that are far
Right,
beyond
right.
far beyond what they ever
Right.
thought before.
And I would like to mention, Diane, that there is going to be a training in attitudinal healing the weekend of October 17th here in Hawaii. Not sure whether it's going to be in Kailua or Honolulu, but it should be up on their website. You know
Right.
the website, Diane?
Right, it's
Yeah,
ahhawaii.org. That's
Okay.
And we'll be doing
ahhawaii.org.
part of the training. Jerry and I will be there with Trish Ellis,
Oh,
who's one of the
great.
founders of the Hawaii
You're
Center
gonna
for
be
Attitude
here.
Healing.
So
We will
about-
be there. We'll be part of the training on Friday night.
So I imagine in a couple of weeks that'll be up on the website, and they can find out exactly where it's going to be.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So actually, they can go to, they can also find out about it at your website, ahinternational.org.
Right, it'll be up there, yeah, just the next week
So
or so.
ahhawaii.org.
Yes.
And
Yeah, and you can see that on my hat. Diane made the
international.org.
design here for these two hearts getting together as one, and that's what it's all
With
about.
ahinternational.org. That's the global web portal for attitudinal healing worldwide, at ahinternational.org.
But look at all. I mean, this is just one little offshoot of the work that you do. These programs at schools in Hawaii to help kids make well, how do I put it? Make better choices in their life, because many of them, choose friends that lead them down the wrong path, or they choose drugs when they don't have to choose drugs, or they choose what do you say? You can choose peace over conflict.
And
How do you
love
say
over
it?
fear.
And love over fear.
Mhm.
And those are some incredibly important choices. If they
Right.
learn that when they're in high school or earlier, what a great advantage they have throughout the rest of their lives.
They have a lot more choices.
And
Right.
we feel that the majority of stress that people feel today in the world really comes not from the external situation, but from our own judgments, if you will, and our own lack of forgiveness. And when we begin to forgive what we're seeing out there and realize that our mind helps create what we see out there, we begin to create a peaceful world, because we pass on the biggest gift we can give to another person, and that's our love and our peace. Particularly when we're talking about people who are dying, and you're not sure what to say or what to do. If we just remember, the words are not that important. What's really important is the energy that we have of being with another person.
Right. And the love that you're giving.
And not have a prescription about the form about how someone should die. Allow them to make their own choices. So we're continually empowering people all the time, and that's what happened in Bosnia, in Croatia, that our center created an empowerment of the people to make their own choices. Many other nonprofit organizations had more of a vertical role, and when the money stopped coming in, they stopped. Everything fell flat. Ours continued to grow because they were empowered to grow.
Right.
And it has its own energy.
I'm going to say one quick story, and then we're going to wrap up.
Okay.
But what you were just telling me about inner peace, one day I was giving a ride to a Buddhist priest, and we were talking, and she was saying, well, what do you want to see your work as? And I was talking about, well, trying to create world peace. And she says, I'm surprised at you. And I said, what do you mean? She says, don't you know that even your own Bible says there's not going to be world peace? They talk about Armageddon and all that.
Mm.
And she says, don't you know the only peace there is inside? And that's what we try to strive for. And when she said that, I thought about you, and I said, my gosh, that's what Jerry and Diane teach in their book, Love is Letting Go of Fear.
Health is inner peace,
Health
and
is
healing
inner
is
peace.
letting go of fear.
Right.
The second principle of attitudinal healing.
Right, it's amazing. Well, we've only got a couple minutes left. Is there anything you want to say to our viewers about your organization, ahinternational.org, or?
Well, everyone is welcome to come to join, or at least to look around, and everything there at no charge, and it's really a global community looking at how we can heal our own minds and hearts. And people of all faiths and all cultures belong.
And how can they get a copy of the new edition?
It's available on the website under the marketplace, or you can go to Amazon.com.
Okay, great. Jerry, do you have any
Well,
final
just
comments?
remind people our message is really rather simple. Simplicity is difficult for a confused mind to understand. And what we're talking about is living a life where you make inner peace your only goal, forgiveness your only function, and you do your best to live in a consciousness of giving and making, helping others as important as helping yourself.
Right. And for the viewers, we're going to be having a training in attitudinal healing.
The weekend of October 17th, Friday night, Saturday and Sunday.
This is in Hawaii.
Yes.
If you want more information about that, you can go to ahhawaii.org. That's ahhawaii.org. Or you can also go to ahinternational.org to find out more information. And if you want to get a copy of Love is Letting Go of Fear, the new 3rd edition, you can go to ahinternational.org to their
marketplace,
their
and all of our
marketplace.
books are there, and a lot of other wonderful books by authors are there.
Right, and
Or Amazon.
or you can go to Amazon to find a copy of that.
Or
book.
Barnes & Noble, any of the online
Any of
sites,
the-
Cap it. And it's
and
also
actually,
available in Kindle,
it's ubiquitous. It's all
electronic, everything.
over. It's all over the
everywhere.
world. We want to thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Thank you for having fun.
I feel so privileged that I have the founders of Attitudinal Healing and the executive director of ahinternational.org. You're so kind to me, and actually Hawaii is very fortunate that you claim Hawaii as at least one of your homes, and we're happy to have
half
you
of our home.
here.
Well, thank you for your support
Thank you.
of Attitudinal Healing here in Hawaii.
And
We
Dr.
appreciate
Shintani,
it.
thank you for what you do for the health of Hawaii, both internal and external health.
Thank you. All right, and I believe this is our time is up, and I want to thank everyone for listening and viewing Healing in You radio and TV, because this will be broadcast on TV. Thank you for listening. I wish you the Lord's blessings always. Aloha.
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 For more information about attitudinal healing, go to www.ahinternational.org, and for programs and support groups in Hawaii, go to ahhawaii.org. Once again, for information about attitudinal healing, go to ahinternational.org, and for programs and support groups in Hawaii, go to ahhawaii.org.